Ooh, it's interesting. Okay. Well, welcome everybody to the London Borough of Hammersmith and Fulham's Cabinet meeting. My name is Stephen Cowan. I'm the leader of London Borough of Hammersmith and Fulham, and we're joined by a variety of councillors in the Cabinet and possibly others. It's being live streamed and will be recorded on YouTube, and it is available for the public to watch. And if you look up the councillor engagement rules, then at any future meetings you will also be able to seek questions, and those are available on the website www.lbhf.gov.uk. Okay, well, can I begin by setting some rules for how we're going to run this meeting? Can I ask everybody who is not speaking at the moment, which is obviously everyone but me, to mute? And if you do want to speak, then come off mute, which will place you on my screen, and then I may call you. But then again, I may not. And that's just how the meeting has to work. Please don't try and talk over anybody else, as that would make this technology all the more difficult to use. We have a busy agenda tonight, and I will come on to it in a moment or two. But before I do, I should really set out the issue that we've all been dealing with since the last Cabinet meeting and talk about some of the things that have occurred. Now, as you know, we cancelled the, I think it was March, the April Cabinet meeting, and we cancelled that because back on the 13th of March, Hammersmith and Fulham became one of the first councils to formally move into an emergency setting. And that meant we began to restructure all our resources so they were completely focused on dealing with the likely damage of the COVID-19 virus as it went through our borough and the wider society. That meant all meetings were cancelled, all our staff were reorganised and retrained, and the new focus being on what could we do to maintain critical services and what new services would we be running. And within that, it meant how would we reach out and work with partners like we've never worked before. And those partners, some of whom were in the public sector, obviously, such as the police and particularly the National Health Service, but also others in the third sector, like the food banks and the community groups and the charity sector. And that, in those early days, meant that we had a very steep learning curve as we worked 7 days late into the night. Regularly, I would be closing down calls with Kim, the chief executive, Kim Smith, the chief executive, and her team, and sometimes we would be working till 1 o'clock in the morning. But the reason was there has never been anything like a pandemic before. I am pleased to report that in those surreal early days when we were extremely alarmed at a projected death rate of just short of 1,000 on our population, which is roughly 200,000, then all from one particular virus, then that meant officers who had previously been booking, managing day-to-day normal council services, focused on normal council issues, found themselves booking extra mortuary places, booking hotels to alleviate the strain on our hospitals, working to get all homeless people off the streets, etc., etc. That wasn't only a huge learning curve, it was a gargantuan task in itself. So I want to take a moment to say thank you to everybody in the borough who's got us to this place. The death toll is nowhere near as projected, although there is still a serious and present risk as the contagion is in our borough, and as we've seen, spreads rapidly, exponentially, because it is so easily transferred. But what you'll see when you look around Hammersmith and Fulham is banners asking people to stay home and stay safe. You'll see banners encouraging people to wash hands. You will see banners asking people to remain at least a car's length away to keep coronavirus at bay. And you will see banners offering help, even if people are lonely or suffer mental challenge, then there are volunteers now able to do that. And what we've seen in our borough is just short of 2,000 people join up to be volunteers. A staggering amount of good people who have given up their time and started working in all sorts of different ways to look out for their neighbours and to do the right thing by society. So all of us should celebrate those heroes who have put themselves above others to make sure that we hang together and get through this crisis. Many things have happened, but what no one will have seen is a failure from Hammersmith and Fulham Council at any level. All our critical services have been maintained to a very high level of performance. So our bins are cleaned, our streets are cleaned, Meals on Wheels are delivered, our elderly people are receiving home care, and many of the services that people need at a frontline level are continuing, and continuing by people who are putting themselves at risk as they do so. We've risen to the challenge of testing and extra PPE, which was an issue in the early days. And certainly when we began this process, our country was in a very different place. We viewed the level of difficulty people were having in coming to terms with the pandemic, which was understandable, but as a serious risk to the death rate, because people were celebrating in parks, in pubs, and some of that, you might argue, had come from the top, as the wrong messages had been set, with Prime Minister attending a rugby game, Cheltenham Festival taking place, and concerts going on even as late as the 15th of March. But we were very clear that if we hammered home the message of stay home, save lives, then that would get through. And the public have behaved perfectly. In nearly all cases, the public have been with us, working with us, and helping us save lives on an amazing scale. So that's enough for me on that subject. I know Ben Coleman might want to come in as our cabinet member for public health and adult social care. But I would like to say on behalf of everyone in the borough that in the most difficult of times, when people genuinely questioned how we would respond, I am proud of everybody, residents, businesses, and particularly the NHS on our council staff, as we've all risen to that challenge. So thank you, and I know I speak for all the residents when I pass that message on to all the staff. Ben, would you like to say anything to add on to that?
Yeah, I think one of the really, this is a terrible crisis, and it's a terrible situation that our care staff and our care homes and NHS staff are facing. One of the only good things that can be said to come out of this is the fact that we are operating together in terms of the health services and the social care services in a way which we haven't done for years. The NHS staff and the nurses and the doctors are incredible people. The hospitals that we have in the borough are fantastic. The only problem is often the NHS at the top in Whitehall gets in the way of us working well locally together. And this crisis has enabled us to sweep away a lot of that. So we're now doing things which, quite honestly, I don't think any other borough is managing to do in the terms of the way that we're testing people. We went into all our care homes. Our public health director has been dealing with that with the hospital for weeks already, although the government gave that responsibility to public health directors across the country just yesterday. And we're getting incredible amounts of PPE. We are going ahead on testing. So really, the message I'd like to, the thanks I'd like to give is to our extraordinary staff and to the extraordinary staff of the NHS who are cutting through the mess that a centralised government and an over-centralised NHS have created and the problems they've created, and we're able, as a result, to deliver more for our residents. And it takes really original people and really tough people to do that. And I think we're lucky in this borough to have those people working for us and also working in the local NHS. That's what I say for the moment. You're on mute.
Thank you, Ben. I'm going to now work through the report. If anyone wants to speak and I call them, please do wait till I call them. Then do say your name and your position, because people viewing may not know who you are. I'm going to move through the agenda now. And I start by asking for people to view the minutes of the last meeting. Is there anything on the minutes of the last meeting held on the 2nd of March 2020? No. In which case, are those agreed? Please nod.
Agreed.
Great.
Agreed. Yeah.
Agreed.
All right. Are there any apologies for absence, please?
I can't see Councillor Macmillan.
Right.
Councillor Macmillan, are you here? So it's only hers.
So Councillor Macmillan and Councillor Connell's here.
Councillor Connor is here.
Excellent. Okay, so please take those apologies. Are there any declarations of interest? Right, I take that as no. We will now move on to the next stage in the agenda, which is a reports pack. And again, I remind you to ask to say who you are. We're moving to item 4, delivering social value in Hammersmith and Fulham. I have either Councillor Coleman or Councillor Schmidt who may wish to speak to that item. Who would like to go first, or is it just one of you speaking?
Max, do you want me to go and then you come in? I suppose you're on silence. I'm going to take that as a yes. Leader Steve, I've been working on this. This is under the. This has been going for a long time. Our attempt to improve the way that we spend 270 million pounds a year on buying goods and services. And in my previous cabinet role, which I was looking at how we could spend that money more effectively, so we can get extra jobs out of it, extra employment, extra greening initiatives for the borough. Councillor Schmidt's taken this initiative forward, and we now have a new social value procurement strategy, and it's got a simple idea at the basis, which is that we should, any contract over £100,000, we're expecting that 10% of what it offers will be judged. 10% of the judgment we make on it will be around the social value it offers, and that will go up to 20%. And this won't be about people saying, oh, we're doing something useful, we're building a building for you, we're providing school windows, we're helping in this charitable way, and that's a social value. What this actually will do is to look at the additional contribution they can make to the borough, and they will have to look at what additional jobs they can bring in, how they can support local small firms, how they can work with local charities to give them more opportunities. And so the £270 million that we spend a year will go that much further. It's been a long time coming, this strategy. Max Schmidt and I and others have worked on it for a good long time. I think we're in a good place now, and I'm happy to take any questions. Or Max, would you like to add something?
In that case, I'll move on. Is there anybody else who wants to comment on that report? In that case, is that report agreed?
Agreed.
Good. Well done. That's a very good piece of work. It will help a lot at a particularly important time. The next item then, Avon Moorbrook Green and Addison Neighbourhood Plan Forum Area. Councillor Jones, can I call you to speak to this document as it rests within your brief?
Thanks, Steve. Andrew Jones, Cabinet Member for the Economy. This report comes to Cabinet slightly later than it might have done because of the current situation. I think members will recall there was a previous application from the same group, which was considered by Cabinet last September, and that's talked about in the report you've got in front of you in paragraph 30. At the time of the Neighbourhood Forum application, the Cabinet wasn't satisfied that the steering group was really capable of meeting the conditions for the Neighbourhood Forum designation, and the application then in September was refused. This is a new application. It's a standalone application for the same area, and the applicants have provided more detail about the membership of the proposed forum than they did before. However, the officer advice and what we've looked at, it doesn't yet satisfy the statutory criteria for designation. This is set out in paragraphs 9 to 25 of the report. And fundamentally, the current membership isn't drawn from different places across the proposed neighbourhood area, and nor is it considered to be sufficiently representative of the different sections of the community, business and education sectors. So the report recommends it in front of you today, and the recommendation is that the area forum application, this one, is refused.
Okay, is anybody else want to come in on that? In that case, can I this item agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you, everybody.
Councillor Cowan, for the purpose of the recording, may I have the name of the councillors who've agreed the report, please?
Yeah.
Councillor
Councillor Lisa Homer.
Ben Coleman.
Councillor Connell.
Wesley Harcourt.
Councillor Culhane.
Councillor Fenimore.
Councillor Jones.
Is Councillor Schmidt there?
He said he agrees on the chat for function.
He's having problems with his microphone. His sound's not working or something, but he's
Right,
following.
but he agreed on the chat function. I've agreed. Is anybody else who hasn't spoken? Okay, thank you very much. In which case, I will now move on to what is a particularly good piece of news, and there's more good news to come on this case. Water Meadow Court, termination of land sale agreement, and Edith Summerskill House, extension of conditional period. Councillor Jones, this is in your brief.
Thank you. Is this, are you on item 6 or item 7, just to clarify? The item 6 is the demolition, security and land sale.
Item 7?
Item 6, yeah.
Oh, I jumped straight from 5 to 7. That's the problem with looking at the notes.
Yeah.
Sorry. To item 6, demolition, security and land sale. Sorry, Councillor Jones, item 6.
Yeah, I mean, the two are obviously linked. Item 6 is to speak to first. This is the budget for £526,000 in relation to the project, which needs additional budget for 2 reasons. Firstly, because of the progress that hasn't taken place with the GLA agreement to cover additional security costs, contract inflation and staffing. There was a delay because the GLA didn't provide planning consent for the scheme. And the second reason is because Stanhope advised, the contractual partner in the joint venture, advised in October last year that they couldn't meet the contractual obligation to secure funding for the project, as I think you alluded to. So the council cannot now hand the land over to the JV following the demolition of the buildings, and it needs to secure and manage the site against illegal occupation until such time as development is brought forward. So that's item 6.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I therefore move on to item 7, which is the Water Meadow Court termination land sale agreement.
I take it that was agreed, item 6.
So I'm just reading a note from someone. Is item 6 agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. So item 7 is what you referred to, which is the termination of the land sale agreement and also an extension in relation to the other part of the development under the joint venture, Edith Summerskill House on the Clement Attlee estate. As I said, Stanhope did not wish to proceed. They couldn't meet their contractual funding conditions, primarily due to a set of external circumstances in their funding. So they didn't want to proceed with Water Meadow Court, and the council will now pursue an alternative development. There's a negotiation that's gone on, and I'm pleased to also report, as it sets out in the report, the contractual costs of termination to the council was reduced by about £1.5 million down to £3.5 million. The second part of this report seeks to extend the time frame on Edith Summerskill House because there was a judicial review challenge to the original planning application, which therefore had to be quashed, and a new application is going to be submitted in April for that development to succeed, which will involve transfer of the site to Peabody Trust for social housing development. I should say overall, in terms of the headline of the termination, this is good news in terms of our manifesto commitments as an administration, because it will through this process enable us to increase significantly the proportion of genuinely affordable housing on the sites, across the sites.
Can I also add praise to Jo Rowlands and her team for what is a work. This was a dreadful scheme when we inherited it, and it wasn't particularly improved until Jo appeared on the scene, and she has essentially taken a site that was always social housing and guaranteed that it can be a significant proportion of social housing again. And when you look at the scale of the crisis, then I think it really is much needed. And so Joe Rillmans, thank you once again for another amazing piece of work. Okay, is that item agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Agreed. Right, next, item number 8, procurement strategy to commission external provider for delivery alternative provision of alternative provision places in Hammersmith and Fulham. Can I call Councillor Larry Culhane to introduce his report and to talk to it, please?
Thank you, Leader. So you'll all be aware that the council has a statutory responsibility to ensure that there is adequate alternative provision within the borough for our students, and this report sets out how we intend to deliver that over the next 2 academic years. And it marks a big change in direction from the legacy contract that we inherited from the tri-borough service that we left in 2018. And some of the big points of the report show that we intend to reduce the numbers of students that are out of mainstream school, and instead we want to bolster the outreach and support in mainstream schools. And secondly, we want to ensure that there is clear and tight performance management over this contract, which is set out in the report. And over the course of the 4 years that we will have been a sovereign service in education by 2022, we will hopefully have seen a reduction in 171 commission places in alternative provision to 88. I have to give a big thanks to the secondary heads within the borough. We took the opportunity when we became a sovereign borough to ask them to give us their views on the current situation, and they worked together and gave us a report chaired by Gary Kinniston, head teacher at Hammersmith Academy, which they unanimously said, we want less of our students out of our schools, we need more support in them, which is set out in this report. And within it as well, you'll see 2 other minor points: an increase in support at primary school, which is becoming more needed, and a slight diversification of our alternative provision providers. But happy to take any questions if you have any.
Are there any questions?
Yeah, can I just, it's rather than a question, it's a comment. This is a great piece of work, and it's going to make a lot of difference. And I just wanted to say, because we just talked about social value, if looking at 16.10, paragraph 16.10, I'm really glad that the contractors, the officers putting this together, embrace the new social value approach, and that they're going to be looking at the way this can also create new jobs and work placements and apprenticeships, and also the environmental impact. So besides the good that it's going to do by in and of itself, it's going to have these extra benefits for our community. And given the tough economic situation facing people in our borough and our commitments to combat climate change, the fact that they're talking about jobs and the environment are really good extras for this contract. So well done, Larry. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Benjamin.
My pleasure.
And I would like to say thank you very much to Larry Culhane, Councillor Culhane, and to Jan Parnell, the senior officer in schools who's responsible for this, and indeed to Gary Kinniston, the head teacher at Hammersmith Academy. This is an issue very close to my heart. It was simply unacceptable that too many children were being excluded. When they were excluded and going to the PRU, their life chances were too often, significantly diminished. And we had serious issues with the PRU and the way it ran that service at the time. It's very good to see that there have been significant improvements, and I look forward to moving on. But this is a continuous battle. We want to see no children excluded, and we want to create an education system where people are achieving their ultimate, tied into our economic strategy or industrial strategy, and giving people the best possible life chances available to them. And that's what every child growing up in this borough should be expected to get. So thank you very much, Larry, for that first step report. And we will review the PRU closely and continue to do so with a very critical eye. Okay, moving forward then, is that agreed?
Agreed.
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 Thank you.
Agreed.
Thank you. The next item, item number 9, we're going to delay till the June Cabinet meeting. And the reason for that is one of the ways we do business is to work through public commissions, independent commissions, often and usually led by members of the public or an expert. And in this particular case, we're very grateful to everyone who's working in the Parks Commission, led by Tim Prager, who's doing a fantastic job. In this instance, they've produced an interim report which coincided with some of this report. And whilst the Parks Commission have fed into it, when we reread it and reread the interim report, we felt there was more to be done. And so we have pulled this report with a view to doing more when we bring it back either in June or later on. But thank you very much. That's being pulled. Is that all noted and agreed?
Noted.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Can I ask you
Noted.
Agreed.
Can I ask you to note the forward plan of key decisions? Is that noted?
Noted.
Noted.
And just on any
Noted.
other business, I think. Okay. And just on any other business. So there's two aspects of the pandemic, and the priority for us is very clearly saving lives and keeping people safe. And there are many people who will get COVID-19 asymptomatically and be fit and not realise that they could pass it on to other people who are vulnerable to infection. And if they get the infection, it will kill them or can kill them. And that's what we've spent much of the last few months with our focus on. We've always had an eye to how we regenerate the local economy. There are businesses, particularly public-facing businesses, but all businesses around the borough are going to suffer as we hit the biggest recession in 300 years. The Treasury is working on a U-shaped recession, which means a sudden drop now and a flat line at a very small level of the shrinkage of the economy, a big shrinkage of the economy, which will last up until 2023. That's their projection. Now that could mean large amounts of unemployment, large amounts of business failures, and the change in our community like we haven't seen before. So just as we've risen to the pandemic and the health challenge, our focus is very much on the economic challenge and the welfare of all our citizens. I think because of the fine work of Councillor Andrew Jones, our Cabinet Member for the Economy, we are ahead in many ways because we have an industrial strategy linked into the STEM industries that we're attracting to the borough in partnership with Imperial College London, but also linked to the heritage we have of digital media and media more generally and the arts. So we're fortunate to have the BBC, ITV, Endemol, Disney and many other firms here and other companies like Novartis moving in, all strong and able to weather an economic hit of some type. But there are many businesses that don't, and at the next meeting we'll be looking forward to bring a plan forward that looks to regenerate. I can assure the Cabinet and indeed all our residents that we are lobbying government very strongly. The government has to work internationally. Indeed, the G20 has to come forward with a plan. It's not just Britain that's suffering this. And as it does so, that plan has to be bigger probably than the Marshall Plan for Europe, or indeed Roosevelt's New Deal plan that got the American economy going after the Great Depression in the 1930s. This is the scale of the action needed to get our borough, our city and our country up and working again. And we are very much making those cases to government and to others in power about what needs to happen next. So we will bring a report to that at the next Cabinet meeting. And I do want everybody to know who might be tuning in that this is very much at the front of our minds, along with keeping people safe. I suppose a final thing is last night, all of us watched the Prime Minister's statement. And I think it's fair to say there was a third degree of dismay, not just as I've seen in the public discourse, but also with those on the front line, because it's unclear. So Hammersmith and Fulham Council on Friday instructed our council workers not to necessarily come into the office. We have frontline workers already on the front line, whether they're cleaning our streets or caring for our citizens. But there are others who have successfully worked from home, and our absenteeism levels are just slightly above the peacetime norm. So we are not asking our staff to come in, And what we are seeking from the Prime Minister is much greater clarification on what he meant last night with the new messaging. But until that time, the London Borough of Hammersmith and Fulham's very clear health messaging to all our citizens and local businesses is stay home, save lives. If you have to do vital work and you're within those key worker groups, then of course do that, which is what is carrying on at the moment, but do not risk yourself on public transport. And certainly make sure that you're aware that we're still very much in the middle of the contagion. That's the message from Hammersmith and Fulham, and will continue to be the message until we get clarity, the necessary clarity from government and agreement across all the 4 nations and indeed health experts across the country. Now that's my any other business. Ben, I noticed you put your hand up. Would you like to say something as well? Andrew Jones, did you come in on this, Andrew, or is it a different matter? So I'll call Andrew first.
Thanks, Steve. I just wanted to come in on the economy, which was we will indeed bring forward plans about recovery and regeneration at the next meeting. But I just at this stage wanted to say a big thank you to our Officer Economy team who have been working many, many hours. We have engaged and are continuing to engage with hundreds of businesses in the borough who are facing enormous challenges. And the local business Hammersmith and Fulham Business Network is extremely active. It's engaging with business groups and different hospitality and other sectors. We're gaining a lot of insight into the challenges that businesses are facing, and I want to thank those businesses for engaging, but also our officer team who are working long hours to try and do all they can to keep things going in these very difficult and challenging times. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Andrew, and I think all of us echo that.
Yeah.
Right. Ben, any other business?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention something which is just hit sort of our desk today, and which could be a problem, I think, for councils across London. Everyone is aware of the fact that care workers are in the front line just as much as NHS workers. In this borough, we have 700 people, staff, going into 2,600 homes, looking after people, keeping them safe, not in care homes per se, but in their own homes. And we support people with mental health issues, masses and masses and masses of work we and other councils do. This is consistently downplayed, and the NHS talks about partnership with us, but find it very difficult to engage in proper partnership. Now, what's just happened is we councils are meant to be working with the NHS on things called integrated care systems. I mean, meant to be working on an equal basis, but the NHS has just come out with a paper, which I think you should be aware of. It came out last Monday with a huge journey to a new health and care system paper, which would completely change, in many ways, the way that the NHS in London and health and care services are delivered following the coronavirus. So it's great that the NHS wants to look at that, but they have asked the integrated care systems, which comprise councils and the NHS, they've asked just the NHS to let them have their comments in a single week on how the ICSs should be changed. And we're really worried. We think it means that they're not really committed. There are doubts about the commitment they have to working authentically with local councils, which represent people which are democratically elected. They're slamming through a breakneck timetable, which means there may not be proper scrutiny. And the paper's very weak on scrutiny. And it completely ignores the structural weaknesses in the NHS itself. So I've written, just to let you know, we weren't invited to by the CCG, but we thought we would volunteer to. We've written a response from the borough to our local clinical commissioning group, and we've asked them to pass that on to NHS London, saying that we need authentic partnership working and talking about what that means. And I'm going to be contacting all the Health and Wellbeing Board chairs across London and making them aware of our view. And we're also contacting the directors of adult social care. It's a great idea the NHS wants to look at how we can improve health and social care, but as always, they're leaving social care behind. We're the people that get everyone out of hospital, that look after them when they come out, whether having had COVID or anything else. And we're absolutely the fundamental front line, and the NHS still only gives us lip service. So we're disappointed by what's happening in London at the moment. We're disappointed by NHS London's proposals, and we hope that we and other councils can change them. And I thought colleagues would wish to know what's going on. Thanks, Leader.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I heard about the report. It was flagged up to me by someone on London councils. And actually, one of the positive things about the pandemic is we are working with other London councils across all political persuasions in a way that's cohesive, in a way that I've never known in the 20 years I've been an elected representative. So that is very positive, but it was passed on to me. And I think we need to just separate out who we're talking about in the NHS, because there are heroes day in, day out. I know you're well aware of and are very proud of, who are keeping the operation going and have dealt with huge levels of catastrophe. And we're particularly proud of all the people in the NHS who are working on that. There are some managers, the same indeed senior managers in the senior parts of the NHS and the Department of Health, who were the same people often enough who designed Shaping a Healthier Future and wanted to put through the closure of Charing Cross Hospital. And they were wrong then, as we've seen now, and they're now, as we will see later, on this latest plan to essentially take a load of adult social care and put it into hospitals. And it's really not the way to work with anybody, let alone their partners in local government. So I think you're right to raise that, Ben. And maybe we could publish your letter, and maybe we could bring a paper that summarises our position to the meeting.
Yeah, I do think you're absolutely right. Thank you for making that point. The frontline NHS people we have in this borough, the people working at Charing Cross Hospital, our doctors, our GPs, the nurses are incredible. And we're all working with lots of residents groups and baking things for them and supporting carers. It's what happens in Whitehall, it's what happens at London centrally that seeks to centralise everything and cut councils out. And it's so far from making use of the brilliant work that NHS individuals are doing on the ground together with council individuals. And we don't want that to be lost. That's come out in this crisis. We're working better on the ground than ever before. And we don't think the out of touch, centralised management should ignore the good things that are happening. So that's what I was talking about. But I couldn't be more admiration for NHS staff as I am for care staff. I bang the saucepan for them both every Thursday. Okay, excellent. So we had a full meeting of the Cabinet there with all attendees other than Councillor Macmillan, whose apologies we've registered. Once again, can I thank the council officers for a tremendous piece of work. And can I particularly thank, and I've been advised it's the 2,200 local residents who've taken part in the Hammersmith and Fulham Community Aid Networks, H&F Can, and it's stunning work. I was at the food bank myself the other day working with some of the volunteers, and they really are inspirational in not only the work they're doing, but the consistency of how they're applying themselves to protecting others. So very grateful to the Hammersmith and Fulham Can and the mutual aid groups who are all working to keep our society together. Thank you very much. It is a bit odd, by the way, doing this, talking to everybody from my kitchen and doing a formal Cabinet meeting, but I guess we will get used to that in time. And I look forward to seeing you virtually at the next meeting. Thank you very much. Thanks.